Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? How is everyone doing? And there is a severe delay between StreamYard and what I'm seeing here on YouTube. The delay is probably about 20 seconds. So, it just is what it is. But yeah, how's everyone doing? How is everyone been doing? Let me just give it a couple moments for people to come on in before we get started. Before we get started, yeah, this is going to be a more of a deep dive, more of an examination, a spiritual investigation. So, this isn't a fun kiki reading, but you know, um, I think this is important because it adds to things that we can investigate, should investigate spiritually, naturally, astrologically, everything like that. So yeah, so like I said, I'm just gonna give it a couple minutes for people to come on in. People to come on in, do me a favor and like the video if you have not. Like the video, it helps me out. It helps the algorithm. Go ahead and show your support and your love for your girl. Okay, let me see. Dr. Johari is here. Brittany, yes. Hello to the coterie. Sunray Physique, super spicy spice. Yes, I love that. Super spicy spice. I love that. Joanna's here. Isis, CN1. Okay, Sunray says she's hungry. I'm here in the clouds this time of day. Yeah, I just had a salad. So the salad was good. We are going out to dinner tonight. So, I had salad. I had my vegetables, before I go out to dinner. Dr. Johari says, loving these streams during work time. Okay. Okay. I like that. I like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So yeah. You hungry? Yeah, like I said, I'm good. I worked out. Um, taking my time, just have some time for self. And then I ate. So yeah, I'm spending time here with you all before I get ready to go on my dinner date with Mr. Hoodoo. So we're gonna get right into it. We're not going to dilly-dally for too long. So let me just go ahead and pull up this video. Right? Let me go ahead and pull up this video because I watched this video and I thought it was really, really good because it explains something that I was picking up on myself. So yeah, we are going to definitely I'm going to review this video with you all. So we're going to you know, we're just going to get into it. So let me okay, copy the link. Let me get the link ready, right? Y'all know how we do it. We're going to get the link ready. The link. Yeah. And this is what we are going to dismiss. Let me share the screen. Kevin says YouTube didn't notify me again. I just found out you were live on accident. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's weird. Make sure Mercury retrograde is coming, messing with the electronics. Make sure you check your notifications, and your subscriptions for the channels that, you subscribe to and have notifications turned on for because YouTube will turn them off. Okay. See, let me go ahead and show this. And like I said, remember I was talking yesterday about, you know, um, is there an astrological signature to some things? Right? I've been doing the deep dives. And the deep dives, yeah, I have been doing the deep dives. So I'm going to remove myself from this and yeah, I'm going to remove myself from this. So we're reviewing this video. This was a video done by a professional astrologer, Eve Dembowski. Okay, this was a presentation that was done, I think, last year. Okay, and I found it, I found it maybe about 3 weeks ago, and I was just like, oh, this is going to be good to listen to. Because again, noticing the signatures, noticing the frequencies as it pertains to certain things that happen in our lives, right? The planets do what they do, you know. Um, yeah, the planets do what they do, nature does what it does, right? So, is there a signature? Now, those of you who are channel members and Patreon patrons, we kind of talked about the one that I think I found yesterday as it pertains to explosives and domestic infighting here in the country, right? You all were there for the stream. So yeah, I do believe that there is a signature to it. And this astrologer Eve, she is going to go over it, right? So she's going to go over it. I want everyone to listen and kind of pay attention. I'm going to break things down as well. Um let me see if I can make this bigger. Yeah, I'm going to break things down as well as it pertains to like these charts and stuff like that and explain things. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Have your notebook or your snacks or whatever it is. And just listen. Just listen. Hey girl, how you doing? How you doing, girl? Yeah, YouTube is playing. Uh-huh. So yeah. So let's get into it. This is called Pandemics and Great Conjunctions. Okay. So we already see, hey Mel, we already see, right? The outer planets, two of the biggest planets in our solar system, Saturn and Jupiter, right? And how potentially their energies, you know, are aligned with these pandemics as we have seen a lot of them in human history. Okay, I've seen this before. It's really good. So let's just get right into it. Like I said, do me a favor again and make sure that you like the video. Because it does help me out. It does help the algorithm, right? Um, okay, let me put up a banner before someone tells me I'm trying to get better with my banner. Um, okay, banner is up. All right. So let's get into it. All right. Let's get into it. And this is fair use. Hopefully the person's video that I'm reviewing won't strike my channel, but I'm just using your video, fair use for informational and educational purposes. So let's go.
And how these are all bound up in each other. Eve, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. How would you like questions? Would you like me to alert you when questions come up?
Rabbit holes doing the research for this that I probably astrologers here. And as William Lilly said, astrologers are artists and our canvas is time. We work with moments, and the word moment implies movement. It comes directly from the Latin momentum, meaning movement, motion, moving power, alteration, and change. Time itself is immaterial. Time itself cannot really be defined. We can't touch it or see it. We know it because we experience it and we record it in our memory.
So this is really important, right? When we're thinking about things esoterically, right? When we are thinking about things esoterically, right, we don't see time, but we have ways that we measure time, right? Time, we experience it in the moments, we remember what happened, right? This is, we record history, we record these moments in time, right? So as astrologers, we study these cycles that occur over time as we know it, right? And just like you said, the cycle of planets, you'll see it down here, the third bullet point, define periods of time, right? We know the month, right? The moon moves in its cycle, right? The sun, we go from the first of the month to the first of the month. Seasons, right? Sunrise, sunset, good time to plant, good time to harvest. All these things, we have these ways of measuring time. But the planets are out there doing what they're doing, okay? So I thought this was really good.
Movement is the evidence,
okay.
as astrological charts will represent one moment that has importance within some sort of particular important and regularly return at the right
She's going.
photo, and you start to lose some of the detail,
Okay.
thus forming a grand cycle through all four
Now,
triplicities.
this is where it starts getting interesting.
Average length of each planet's journey through the zodiac, that is 12 years for Jupiter. Now, based on an idealized cycle that uses the average.
Okay.
Now, this brings us to the great conjunction, the cycle of Saturn and Jupiter, which before the discovery of the modern outer planets, this was the grandest cycle of all. It begins, of course, at the conjunction, which was known as the Great Conjunction, which happens every 20 years. Success.
Okay, so this is, astrological fact. These conjunctions, they're happening. They're happening all the time, whether we know it or pay attention to it or not. Okay.
The conjunctions occurred nearly 120 years apart in the same triplicity for approximately 10 to 12 cycles before shifting into the next triplicity, an event that was referred to as the mutation, thus forming a grand cycle through all four triplicities.
And what does she mean by triplicities? We are talking about the way that we combine, right? There are 12 zodiac signs, 12 months of the year. There are 3 months in each season, right? But the triplicities are the modes, the way things change, the way the elemental energies change, right? So there are 4 triplicities, right? We have our earth signs, our air signs, our water signs, our fire signs. Okay, so we have 4, right? 4 triplicities with 3 in each. That's how we get the 12. So this is what she's talking about. So as planets retrograde and they move forward and they conjunct in any one of these elemental signs, they conjunct in a retrograde in earth signs or fire signs or water signs or air signs. So this is what she's talking about. So every time there is a change through one of the triplicities, the energy does something. It mutates. So that's what she's saying.
Now, medieval astrologers used the mean position of the conjunction and were particularly interested in the times of the mutation or elemental shift. Now, based on an idealized cycle that uses the average length of each planet's journey through the zodiac, that is 12 years for Jupiter and 29 and a half for Saturn, the mean.
Okay, remember those of you who were on the members only stream earlier today? Remember we were going through the order of planets as far as Chaldean time movements, right? The Chaldean time movements go from slowest to fastest. So Saturn, like she said, with the 20-year cycle, and Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. Okay, so this is what she's saying.
Conjunctions occurred at precise and very regular intervals, resulting in a clean elemental mutations. They would go from one element to the next.
So conjunction of a cycle. Okay, because we have to roll with Saturn. Saturn moves the slowest. The conjunction, when 2 planets meet and they are together with Saturn, that's going to be a 20-year thing. The mutation cycle, going from element to element. So, we start out with Aries, it would go to Aries and then to Earth and then to air and then water. So that changing going through the signs, going through the zodiac signs, that is the mutation cycle. 240 years for this conjunction that she's talking about, Saturn and Jupiter. The grand cycle of going through all of the signs, not just one element, is 960 years through all 4 triplicities, which means through all of the zodiac. Okay, remember, Saturn and Jupiter, they move the slowest. Okay, so this is where she's getting this time frame from.
So within this grand cycle, we have 3 cycles or time frames that are created. The conjunction cycle of 20 years, the mutation cycle of 240 years, and the grand cycle of 960 years. And I remember learning this when I was a baby astrologer, and I learned this in, I can't remember what book, and I was amazed at how, astrology was so wonderful. It was so regular, and wow, this 960 years, and you divide it by 4 and you get, 240, which is 12 times 20. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. However, the mean position really simplifies a much more complex cycle in which the actual position of the conjunctions and their shift into new elements are much messier. The grand cycle through all 4 of the elements is really much closer to 800 years in duration. The mutation can actually take up to 80 years to complete, because it might make a conjunction in a new element and then it'll go back to the old one. Sometimes it makes 2 conjunctions in a new element and then flips back to the original one before going back to the new one. And
Okay, so what she's talking about is when planets retrograde, right? Retrograde planets is the appearance in the night sky that a planet is moving backwards. So planets, they're moving direct along their path, right, in the sky. So when we say like Mercury is retrograde, that is Mercury no longer moving forward, which would be moving forward to change, into the next sign and element, but Mercury moves backwards a few degrees and then stations direct and then moves forward again. So all of the planets except for the sun and the moon retrograde. Okay. So this is why she's saying sometimes this mutation, sometimes the change to the next element can take up to 80 years, because we do have these periods of retrograde activity with the planets. And it takes even longer, right? When we're talking about the slow moving outer planets like Saturn and Jupiter. Okay. And every time there's, it's a retrograde, they usually conjunct, which means comes together. And when they conjunct, they are then applying or not applying their powers to, to us here on Earth. But the way that it's going to be applied is going to be depending on how the energy is filtered through the mutation, aka through the element, right? This is why your planets and your time of birth is important during an astrological chart, during your birth chart, because a planet may be in detriment, maybe in fall, which means if they are in a sign that doesn't help them out, their powers are weakened. So, for example, Mercury, the planet Mercury in the sign of Pisces, Mercury is not at full power. Okay. Mercury is not at full power. And that's that Virgo Pisces axis right there. Okay. So some planets are exalted. Venus is exalted in Pisces, right? But Venus may be in fall, in another area. So this is why the elements and the planets, this is why it's important, because these combinations, these energetic combinations will either hinder something or help something along, depending on the planet, depending on the element that they're in. Everybody got it? Okay, cool. Let's go.
kind of committing itself to it. So the period between conjunctions is approximately 20 years. And of course, due to retrogression, we might get some conjunctions that occur 3 times within a matter of months. So we're using, the mean positions were used because it was difficult to know precisely when the moment of the conjunction would occur. Therefore, other charts were used to evaluate the conjunction periods. And
let me just move forward a little bit so we can just get to
this
the
might possibly mean. I have a colleague who sort of said, well, Jupiter and Saturn conjunction, it's like the battle of the Titans. You had the 2 biggies coming together. And according to Andre Barbeau, the nature of the phenomenon, the cycle, is dictated by the characteristics of the 2 planets involved in the cycle and the sign of the zodiac against which the conjunction takes place. So, of course, we think of Jupiter as the great benefic, tending towards tolerance and goodwill, bestowing lots of good stuff on us. But he does have a dark side. Jupiter does come with a certain exaggerated moral certainty, a certain exaggerated belief or philosophical arrogance, and it can lead to somewhat being religiously dogmatic or intolerant. Saturn, on the other hand, the great malefic, we know Saturn is a hard taskmaster. We don't like Saturn because he imposes restriction and control. And, ultimately, he brings death because that's his job. He's going to stop life. We're all going to die and we're going to meet Saturn. So whilst he can be very intolerant, he's also protectionist. And in some ways, his job or his character is to seek structure, order, in order to bring security. So when they come into conjunction, this is an interaction that can be very interesting. It's an interaction between ideas and potential possibilities, all the Jupiter stuff, and also the viability of any of their manifestation in concrete material world. So how does this behave in the different elements? Now, I'm really only going to look in detail at the air element and then whip through the others and get into the pandemics, because that's where all the good stuff is.
Okay, so now she's about to go into the elements, the planets. Like I said, the energy filters down very differently depending on if it's helping the planet, hindering the planet, etc., etc. Okay.
So if we think about the air element and we think about themes that the conjunction in air might bring, well, any theme to do with air, ideas, information, communication, travel, trade, making deals, any kind of social interaction, relationships, that's all air stuff. Now, from a disease or health perspective, air is hot and moist. It deals with the sanguine humor. So blood and respiratory problems might be imagined, or you might think about this. But there's also something else, the contagious airborne viruses and germs, because hot, moist, it goes out there, it's moist, it gets everywhere. So the idea of a contagious disease seems very logical in air. Now, Jupiter, it is interesting to look at because Jupiter is, a hot, moist planet. He has no rulership, or except the mixed triplicity rulership of air signs. But, between all of us, really, the mixed triplicity rulership, it's such a minor thing. A lot of times we don't use it. So, Jupiter probably feels a bit gypped that way. And he actually finds his detriment in Gemini, and Aquarius is the 12th sign from Pisces. So he doesn't particularly like Aquarius. So he's not that happy in air, ironically. And really, if you think about it, when a planet's not very happy, it's going to misbehave. So Jupiter's hot, moist nature is going to be exaggerated, which is part of Jupiter's nature, is to exaggerate. So he's going to be an exaggerated version of his exaggerated self. So we could see this as an imbalance of excess of hot, moist. Now, Saturn, on the other hand, he rules and rejoices in Aquarius. He's exalted in Libra. He has triplicity rule over the air signs by day. He loves being in air. Now, Saturn's extreme cold, dry nature is tempered by being in the hot, moist air. So we can assume that the periods in which Saturn and Jupiter meet in the air element will generally be dominated by Saturn's character, but probably his more, in some ways, tempered character. He's still going to want to set boundaries and create rules and do all that Saturn stuff, which a lot of people don't like. The problem is he's going to have to contend with a Jupiter that is going to be a little bit out of control. This excess of hot, moist may result in Jupiter's natural philosophical nature being corrupted and his darker side manifesting. As I thought when I was thinking about this, is like too much hot air, overly confident, too many grand ideas, dogma, opinions, some of which lack facts. Just think about where we're at the moment, and this might make sense. Okay, now the earth element, Jupiter has no rulership, and in fact, he's in detriment in Virgo and fall in Capricorn. So he really is not comfortable in earth. So we would imagine seeing a more negative side of Jupiter during these earth conjunctions. But this is going to be a different side. This is going to be more about.
And this may be a little boring, but this is the foundational background to understand when she's explaining the nature of pandemics and how they align with these planets. So I know it's a little bit boring, but this is the foundational information.
Physical material stuff. So Jupiter's overdoing things, more is best, accumulation, hoarding, love of money, wealth. And the diseases that are of the cold, dry nature might be digestive type diseases. It's interesting to look at the birth of the capitalist system in the late 18th century, just as conjunctions went into Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn, on the other hand, is, not so unhappy in Earth.
Capitalistic systems. I mean, this is about pandemics, but this is why, money and all like that, capitalistic systems, these things came about during one of the Earth ages. Okay. One of the Earth ages. So just a little informational tidbit.
Loves, he's rules Capricorn, so he's okay in Earth. And so we could imagine that these periods will be dominated again by Saturn's manifesting character and possibly the negative side of Jupiter. In the water element, Jupiter is much happier. Jupiter rules Pisces, finds his exaltation in Cancer, so he's a happy chappy in water. Saturn, on the other hand, not so much. He's in detriment in Cancer and doesn't have any kind of rulership or anything. So the periods of the water conjunctions are probably going to be dominated more by Jupiter's character, with some resistance from a frustrated Saturn. I would just surmise here, as far as disease and stuff, that we might see fertility kind of problems. It is interesting. Well, I'll get into that when I get into the pandemics. And then the fire element, again, Jupiter rules and rejoices in Sagittarius, and he's got triplicity rule over the fire signs by night. Saturn, again, only mixed triplicity in fire, so not really much. And he's in detriment in Leo, falls in Aries, and Sagittarius is the 12th sign from Capricorn. So I would say that the periods of fire element will be dominated by Jupiter's character. So we could see a lot of, ideology and, spiritual, religious sort of thing in both water and in the fire elements. I think this is very much the case. It is interesting that both Islam and the Protestant church were born during water conjunctions. Okay. So
that's deep right there. Hey, Raw Talk Culture. Yeah, Kevin. Yeah. So basically, and it just really depends where, a planet is, what they're in. But yeah, because you have to understand Jupiter expands, Saturn constricts. So one is the great benefic, one is the great malefic. So yeah, you're right on that, Kevin. Yep. That's what I'm saying. The planets in astrology be astrologying. So let's listen.
So this basically brings it down to Jupiter's happiest in water and fire and at a disadvantage in air and earth, whereas Saturn is happiest in air and also earth and disadvantage in water and fire.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this relate to pandemics? Well, we're going to find out. So basically, no pandemic occurs in a vacuum. An epidemic is a symptom of imbalance and breakdowns in a system, in a local environment. And a pandemic occurs when that breakdown is extended beyond the boundaries of locality. Now, imbalances occur for all sorts of reasons, from natural to manufactured ones. Natural disasters, climate change, but it could also be political, religious corruption, desire for power, conflict, war.
Notice she said imbalances result naturally and manufactured. So she's taking in, the spiritual and the mundane, right? Things that are happening naturally, things that are happening man-madely, right? That's pretty much the as above, so below. Okay.
And when you start to think about it, if you have a war, you're going to have, economic disparity, you're going to have unsanitary conditions, you're going to have degradation or neglect of the environment. One thing leads to another. So imbalances can occur for many, many different reasons. I do absolutely love this this quote from Albert
Okay,
Camus
so
in his
let
novel
me
The
just move
Plague that says, "But
forward
what does it mean, the plague?"
a little bit.
By the bacterium called Yersinia.
Okay,
The
no.
environment, you're going to, one thing leads to another. So imbalances can occur for many, many different reasons. I do absolutely love this quote from Albert Camus in his novel The Plague that says, "But what does it mean, the plague? It's life, that's all." So let us continue on the plague. So I'm not going to look in detail at the astrology of the plague. The plague was a disease that killed millions and millions of people. And it was finally found in 1894 to have been caused by the bacterium called Yersinia pestis. And there's a few strands of it. Now, of course, there's a lot of information here, and I don't have time to go through all of it. But what I'd like to do is to look at the beginning of this plague and look at the pre-Saturn-Jupiter conjunction at which it started. So it's like the beginning point. So the Justinian plague began in 541 and went for about 200 years till the mid 700s. And basically, it is said that between 30 and 50 million people died during that period. Now, after the first wave, where there were many, many deaths, it kind of died back. And then every 10 to 12 years, it would come back somewhere else. So the pre-Jupiter conjunction in 531, so that was almost 10 years before, was at 19 Gemini. And what needs to be understood is that in 536, there was a series of, volcanic explosions that occurred very close to each other and created a volcanic winter. And the reports of eyewitnesses at the time say that for 18 months, the sun did not shine. So this caused crop failure and all sorts of other things. Now, I didn't read anything about famines, but I would imagine that people were, kind of hungry, and they might have lost a bit of weight during this time and been weakened. And then 6 years later, in Constantinople, in comes the plague through, a ship from Egypt. And so the important thing to remember is that 19 Gemini is when it began. It then mutated into the water conjunctions, but it seemed to have died back around the mid 700s. And there was a mutation into fire in 769. Now, when the Justinian plague arrived in Europe, it was at the opposition of Saturn and Jupiter. So fast forward a few hundred years later, we have the Black Plague. And that occurred, it arrived in Europe in 1347, but they say it probably started around 1338. So if we're looking at the 1338 for in Asia, the pre-Saturn Saturn-Jupiter conjunction was in 1325 at 18 Gemini. And when it finally arrived into Europe, this time through Messina in Italy, the pre-conjunction was at 19 Aquarius. So notice we've come full circle. We have completed a grand cycle from 19 Gemini to 18 Gemini. We're back there. So a grand cycle has been completed, and bang,
Do we see the frequencies? And do we see the energies? Saturn, Jupiter conjunctions, these pre-conjunctions, when they're getting ready to meet up and, have all their, they battle rap. They're going to battle rap. Right? Do we see this? Okay. Yeah. 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 I lost my edges listening to this. But yeah. So let's continue. Let's definitely continue.
have the plague come back. There was also a triple conjunction of Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter in 1345 at 17 Aquarius, which, of course, most of the astrologers of the day put a lot of focus on this, saying this was, this evil triple conjunction was what brought this great Black Death to their world. Now, there was a third plague which started in 1855, and that pre-Saturn-Jupiter conjunction was in 1842 at 8 Capricorn. This one was quite different in many ways, though it is said that it was started by this, caused by the same bacterium. It was much slower. It didn't seem as contagious, and people took longer to die. So there was some differences. It's in Earth.
So notice when she said, that this third plague is spread a little bit slower, right? People took longer to die. That's because Earth is not a fast moving element, right? Earth is not a fast moving element. So I also want you to look at, with the Black Plague, the issues of cleanliness, right? Coughing and, not bathing and all types of that. The Black Plague, you see that air, water, right? It was moving fast around, Asia, because it really started in Asia and then arrived to Europe via Italy, right? Because I did the research and I looked it up. So she's correct with this chart right here. But notice with the third plague, right? Orientalis, the same Black Plague, bubonic plague strain, how the third one, it was slower to move. Slower to move. People took longer to die. That's because it's Earth. Mountains don't move fast. Okay? So understand how these conjunctions through the different elements, understand how they manifest here on Earth. Let's continue.
As opposed to air. So let me go on. I mean, there's a lot that I could say, but I want to get through a lot of material. So I want to keep going. So other pandemics, and what I did was I tried to focus on the ones that were the biggies, because of course there's always diseases and things happening. So what we're looking for is those big ones. So there was the New World smallpox pandemic. And I mean, this one was horrible. I didn't have a chance to really go into detail with this one, but some of the reports I've read that up to 90% of the indigenous population died of this smallpox pandemic that occurred between 1520 and 1600. So the pre-conjunction was at 16 Cancer in water. Then we have the cholera pandemic, which occurred, the pre-conjunction occurred on 1802, and that was at 5 Virgo. The Spanish flu, the conjunction, it happened in the conjunction at 14 Capricorn. The AIDS, which I wasn't planning on looking at, but I've ended up kind of exploring that one almost more than any of the others. It's fascinating. So the AIDS the AIDS pandemic started at the 1980-81 conjunction, which actually happened 3 times because there was retrograde motion. So we have it at 9, 8, and 5 Libra. And that one squares the 1842 third plague conjunction. And finally, we have COVID-19 that happened in 2020. Now, the actual pandemic started at...
Do you all see this? I'm not saying that, the woo-woo be right, but I am saying that the woo-woo be right. Okay? I am saying that the woo-woo be right. Okay? These Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions, here's the thing. The thing about it is as we're taking a look at this and as we're going through this together, you kind of have things and points in time that you can look out for, right? Kevin says never underestimate the woo-woo. Yeah. And notice, look into the Panini, our recent Panini of 2020, right? The pre-Saturn Jupiter conjunction 2000 at 22 degrees Taurus. But notice when you're getting down there to the when it actually was hitting in like the end of 2019 going into 2020, that conjunction, because I remember hearing about the great conjunction. People were freaking out. They didn't know what was going to happen. The astrologers were freaking out. Notice how it's Aquarius, it's air. This moves so much faster because we are an interconnected society. So air travel, things like that, it moves so much faster because of the hyper connectedness of the world now. Okay. So make sure that we are paying attention to how these things manifest you know, as they are manifesting through the elements.
The during the 20-year period of the conjunction of 2000 that happened at 22 Taurus. And I know there was a lot of talk in the last lecture about this 22, and I was immediately going, yes, and it fits into this 2000 conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, 22 Taurus. So we would also want to look at, obviously the 2020 conjunction, because it was so close to when it started. So this is what we're going to be looking at now. So before we begin looking at this, I want to just say that I'm using charts, and I hope there's not too many of them, and I hope that it's not too mind-boggling, but if it is, you can look at the recording and take note of it. But the way I kind of did this, I've done all the charts for the universal time. Well, Greenwich is the time that I use. So the GMT time. Obviously, if we wanted to know specifically more details, we would have to locate these charts in a particular place. Okay, so we have the Spanish flu from 1918 to 1920. Now, looking at this, remember, pandemics occur because of an imbalance in the environment. And probably, I would tend to think that if World War I was not happening, then this may not never have been a pandemic. It would probably have been a bad flu. Many people would still have died, but it would not have been this worldwide pandemic, because it actually began at Fort Riley in Kansas, and it was some soldiers that had it, and they ended up, getting on a train, traveling down to New Orleans, hopping on a boat, and going off to Europe to fight World War I. And they landed, I think it was in France, and then of course it spread this flu everywhere. And it's referred to as the Spanish flu because the Spanish were not involved in the war, but it came to their shores and they started to go, hey, there's all these people dying and they're dying horrible deaths. They were basically like, starting off like a normal flu, bit of a sore throat, bit of a fever, and then suddenly it would hit their lungs, and within 24 hours, a lot of them would die. And basically it was almost like they were drowning in their own the fluids in their lungs. So it was a horrible, horrible thing, and very quick. People would die very quickly, and it was quite a scary thing. So a few other stuff happened, and that is that, the powers that be tried to downplay it. So we have a bit of the propaganda that came in and actually probably made the whole thing worse. And if that sounds familiar, it sounds familiar to me. So this is the pre-Spanish flu conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. And the way I got this chart was I basically animated my software until I got the exact moment when these two came to perfection. So looking at the ascendant descendant, it's not that important. What we really want to see is the connection between the planets in these charts. So we've got an opposition from the moon in this chart. The actual conjunction
Y'all
degree is
couldn't hear
13
me? Oh my
degrees,
goodness.
58
Okay.
minutes.
Okay. So yeah, let me go back to that. Let me just say that real quick. I forgot to unmute. My bad. Okay. So yeah, like I was saying, you have these two, they're conjunct here. Remember, she said Jupiter is usually at fall, right? In the earthy signs. So Jupiter's at fall in Capricorn, right? Notice this opposition of this is Uranus is in opposition to Pluto, right? So we have opposition here, and then Mars is in opposition to Neptune, right? So we have these oppositions going on, and oppositions is just like, we don't know how we're going to manifest things. We're arguing about how we're going to manifest things out, right? But notice we got over here, Mercury is in the 8th house, and this is going to apply, right? Because this is the speediness of the way this is going to travel and spread, right? Because Mercury is air. Okay.
There's also an Antisha with Uranus, which I found kind of interesting. There's something hidden and unexpected that is connected to this particular chart. Saturn is opposite Neptune, and we have Pluto opposite Uranus. But more importantly, that Pluto, and here are the important conjunctions of all the plagues, that Pluto is pretty much on the 1325 conjunction degree, as well as pretty close to the 531 conjunction degree. Now remember, Jupiter's in fall in Capricorn. So, I mean, this is an interesting chart to look at. And there was also this triple conjunction of the three, baddies at 17, 15, and 15 Capricorn, which is.
Now notice, right? She said we have the three baddies here, right? So we have Jupiter. This is Jupiter. The middle one is Saturn. We all know Mars, right? So we have this conjunction going on, right? Yeah. 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 So we see here is a war marker right here. Because we have this Mars here. Mars is conjuncting Saturn. Yeah, that's not good. Jupiter is just going to expand everything in this whole conjunction. So I've been noticing, like, when sometimes there's something quote unquote not good happening, I've been noticing how Mars has been playing with that, especially like we were talking about yesterday with regard to the domestic terrorism that I've seen, pulling up those charts. Mars is usually doing something too. So just something to think about.
Happened a couple weeks after the actual conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. Now, the first reported case was March 11th, 1918. And within 4 months, the virus had made its way around the globe and returned once more to the US shores. I mean, one of the things about pandemics is that they're very quick. They seem to just spread like wildfire. Now, doing the ingress chart for 1918, we would think, well, is there going to be something in this chart that is going to be a hint about what is about to come? Now, we know that much of the world was already at war, and it was a pretty horrific war. So in this ingress chart, we have actually an interesting thing. Venus is at 18 degrees of Aquarius, which is the 1345 conjunction degree. We've got a few things happening, but most of them are either sextiles or trines. It's like there's an easy kind of thing happening. This is the wane.
Right. So with sextiles and with trines, right? So your hard aspects, the ones that, at face value cause trouble, those are your oppositions and your squares. Your sextiles and your trines, right? Those are going to be the easy going. It makes things easier to manifest, as it pertains to an entire astrological chart. Okay. So yeah, we have a sextile here, right? Sextile here. And then we have this conjunction here. We have a little bit of a partile here. So yeah, it's yeah.
Sextile of the 1901 conjunction. So we're coming to the end of that time period. And so Jupiter is waning, it is in a waning sextile to Saturn. We've got Saturn conjunct Neptune. Now, there's a lot of things that could be said about the Saturn conjunct Neptune. And because I'm only focusing on the Saturn Jupiter conjunction, I'm letting some of those things go. I'm just noting them. We've got also we've got an exact partile sextile between the moon and Mars. I'm very much one of these people that I like to see things like partile aspects exact, because then I know this is an active one. So we can look at this chart and we can say, wow, this is pretty, this is pretty interesting. Yeah, maybe it might show. I mean, does it show disease? I'm not sure. Maybe that Neptune Saturn could, there's a few things. But what we really need to do is we need to put it on top of the conjunction chart. So this is the conjunction chart back here, and this is the Aries ingress. Now, if we had a location and we wanted to see how this would, plug in, it would have different angles. I'm not going to focus on the angles because this is just done for the GMT time. It's just so that we have something to look at. But now we're having some really interesting connections. So the C up here means the conjunction. So the conjunction Sun is in a partile opposition to the ingress Jupiter, which is at 5 degrees of. So there's the Sun. Where is it? The Sun is here at 5 Sagittarius, and it is up.
Okay, so she's going back and forth comparing this outer ring chart to the inner ring chart. So right now she's talking about the Sun right here at 5 degrees that is in opposition to, coming over here. Okay, so, just kind of follow along as best as you can.
Opposite the ingress Jupiter. Exactly. I like this. This means something to me. It is also making a trine both to where is it? It's making a trine to the actual Sun of the ingress and as well to the Saturn and Neptune conjunction of the ingress chart. It is also making, I already said that, it's making a trine to the Sun. The conjunction Saturn is in a partile opposition to Pluto. And then we've got a bunch of other stuff. So when we start to look at these charts and we start to see how they interact with each other, it's like, well, yeah, whatever this conjunction of 1901 was about, it is really it's highlighting this ingress chart of 1918. So I found that to be really quite interesting. Now, there were more deadly outbreaks of influenza during the 20th century. All of them happened at the Earth conjunction period. And the Asian flu of 1957 would have occurred at the pre-conjunction at 1940-41, which was a triple one where you had it arriving, happening 3 times. So this takes us to AIDS and COVID. And this is where I want to spend a bit more time because this is bringing us into the future. Where are we going from here?
Okay, so a lot of the previous ones were like air and like water. Now we're just moving through the elements and we're going to see how these things are going to be manifested down through the elements. These are still Saturn, Jupiter conjunctions and pre-conjunctions. Okay, so these are still the 2 big planets, the great malefic and the great benefic. But as they do their conjunction things through these elements, notice how things are manifested out.
Now, why am I putting both of these up? Because they occur during the mutation from Earth to air. And this is an interesting period to look at. So COVID was identified in 2019. It unfolded during the year of 2020 when the last Saturn-Jupiter conjunction occurred. And I've only put this photograph in because it was such a beautiful photograph and I just needed to put it in there. It occurred, as we all know, on the solstice at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Thus, it completed the shift from Earth to air, which began 40 years previously when Jupiter and Saturn met in Libra. So let's look at that. So these are the three conjunctions. The 1980, the first meeting of them, the 2000, and the 2020. So in 1980, it conjunct at 9 degrees of Libra the first time, and then it retrograded back to 8 and conjunct again, and then it went forward and conjunct a final time at 5 degrees. In 2000, it just did it once at 22 Taurus, and in 2020, it did it at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Now, a couple things to note. 1980, Mars was at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So that was kind of pre-echoing the 0 degrees conjunction in 2020. So it kind of brings those two together because, of course, I noticed that Mars was often very active during pandemic times.
What did I just say? Didn't I just say that normally, or, with the recent research that I've been doing, Mars is usually out here doing something, okay? Peeing in the bathwater, peeing in the pool, okay? Making things worse. But that's what Mars is. Mars isn't the great malefic like Saturn, but Mars is considered to be a lesser malefic, okay? Up to no good, right? Mars is just a little bit more out of control, right? But yeah, still up to no good. So she noted that, and I kind of noted that yesterday with the research I was doing. So, I think we're on to something.
Now, the Mars in the 2000 conjunction chart is at 17 degrees of Gemini, which of course brings us to that 1325 conjunction at 18 Gemini. And as well, Uranus in that chart, which is in a trine with that Mars, is at 20 degrees Aquarius, which brings us to the 1345 conjunction. In 2020, Mars was actually at 23 Aries. And this one is really interesting because that was the 1822 conjunction, which was the last conjunction in fire before the final mutation into Earth. So it had gone into Earth and then it kind of went back into fire for one last cycle and then finally decided, okay, I'm in Earth for a while. So it's kind of interesting that it is kind of, connecting up to that. And the 1822 conjunction was actually at 24 degrees of Aries. So this is quite interesting, these connections. And this got me really interested in looking at this in more detail. So let's look at the AIDS. Now, AIDS is something that it was in 1981 when it really became known. So we have three conjunctions, like I said, that occurred. The first one on the 31st of December, 1980, the second one in March 1981, and the final one in July 24th, 1981. So one thing to remember, this first conjunction is the...
Now, with regard to the AIDS situation, right? I have seen people talk about the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto during that time in either 80 or 1981 that was bringing about that helped to bring about that. So I have to look into that some more, but I definitely look at this. Look at this conjunction here. 8 degrees in Libra, 4 degrees in Libra. Here's the thing. Want to know the funny part about this? We have Saturn and Jupiter conjuncting, right, in the early degrees. We have 4 degrees down here, 8 degrees here, and 9 degrees here in Libra. Libra is an air sign That is ruled by the planet Venus. Venus, as in romance, love, and sex. So notice that the signs, even with these conjunctions, this is nothing but hardcore facts for this age, for these A's, for A's, and this conjunction, because they're in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. AIDS is a sexually transmitted disease for the most part. Go and get you some castor oil to rub on your edges.
First time that Saturn and Jupiter conjunct in air since 1405, when they met at 23 degrees of Aquarius. So it's been a long time coming, and now it's back in air. So we'll look at these in a little bit more detail. So the first one we can look at and say, well, there's a couple things going on, the moon and
Kevin is making a good point. Libra is a cardinal air sign. Cardinal signs are the beginnings of something. The beginnings of something jumping off. So you have these conjunctions in Libra, a cardinal sign, to start something, but AIDS is pretty much a venereal disease. We can't make this up. This is not lies. We cannot make this up.
Mars are squaring each other, and Mars is receiving the moon. Okay. Also, we've got Sun, Mercury making a square to the conjunction degree of 9 degrees Libra. But more importantly, that Sun Mercury conjunction is on the 1842 conjunction degree. And the 1842 was the pre-conjunction before the third plague. So interesting. On we go to the second one. The second one, we now have, also here, the most interesting thing about this one is the fact that we have Uranus, who's just gone into Sagittarius and is stationing, about to go retrograde. And it is being squared by Venus. Venus at 5 degrees of Pisces is actually on the opposite of the 1802, which was the pre-cholera pandemic conjunction, which occurred at 5 Virgo. Let me see, what else do we have? We've also got Mars making a square to Neptune. And so we've got, a number of things here. And the final one was the third one. And the first cases of AIDS started to be reported in June of 1981. So we know that this was July 81. And here we've got a few more things. We've got an opposition from the moon to, wait a minute, I think I've drawn it wrong. No, it is there, to moon and Pluto. And we've got Venus making a square to that Pluto. The moon is also trining both Venus and Neptune. And we've got a square from Mars to the conjunction degree. Now, I just want to make sure, is there any comments or questions that I'm missing? Please let me know.
Yeah. What are you thinking about this so far? Like, this is so interesting. This is so interesting. I was sitting in the nail salon listening to this, losing my wig. Like, wow, this is so interesting. But again, it goes back to what I was saying. Certain things do have an energy, a frequency that they ride on, right? And we can see it here with these pandemics. We can see it here with these pandemics, these pre-conjunctions and going into the conjunctions. Yeah, Donna says, I think if we all use astrology more, we'd have way less problems for real. Yeah. Kevin says, and this is why astrology is a whole field study in itself. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I am a baby astrologer, but I am picking up real quick, and I am starting to see these energy signatures, okay, as it pertains to certain things happening, right? As it pertains. So yeah, mind is blown. So yeah.
Oh,
There's quite a lot. So why don't we'll go back a little bit and see if
okay,
there's
yep.
anything else.
Plague. There's like I read this like 50-page article on the plague. It was fascinating, and basically, there now a lot of people are thinking there was like an Ebola type virus that might have been responsible for a lot of what people. So this exasperated and I said that word wrong. Exasperated the the catching of all these diseases.
Scott says
So
this is so widely transmitted infection.
So we've looked at these three charts, and what we really need to do is look at the ingress chart. Now, of course, again, I've just done this for GMT time. It's not, we could do this for a particular location. And interestingly, the AIDS epidemic, the ingress chart was, again, we have that conjunction. Here, it's not perfected, but it's at 6 degrees. It is, we can say AIDS began at the very beginning of the air conjunctions. It is for the next 20 years, but it's also the first for the next, the next mutation, so it is a really interesting thing that this is when AIDS started. Looking at this chart, we can see that it was on a full moon. Mars is included in there, so that moon is making an opposition to that Mars. We've got also Uranus at 0 degrees of Sagittarius, just going retrograde, but right on that 0 degrees, 0 minutes. So a lot of zeros. We've got a number of interesting squares. Mercury is squaring Uranus. Mercury's at 2 degrees, and Venus is making a square to Neptune. And of course, all of these partile aspects between.
Okay, let me see what's going on here. Donna says, question, in terms of Mars, does Venus help to calm down a lot of Mars destruction? It really, really depends. It really, really depends. Like, what sign are they in? Because every planet has its detriment, its exaltation, and its fall, and its domicile, right? So it really, really depends. So, like, Mars in Pisces is not the worst, but Venus in Pisces, she's going to have more power, right? So it really, really depends. Um, a lot of times Mars is kind of moving a little bit faster, and a lot of times Venus is coming behind to clean up some of the foolishness that's happening, behind Mars, depending on where they're placed. So as you can see right here in this chart right here, you see Mars has just entered Aries, right? It's at 2 degrees Aries, right? Venus is coming up behind, but Venus is exalted, right? Venus is at her best in Pisces, right? But this energy is directly oppositional, right, to what's going on here. So it's not, you really have to take it on a case by case basis, right? But Venus here, is kind of helping because Venus is in Pisces, right? This is going to be kind of the signature of, this being a quote unquote sexually transmitted disease. So it just really depends. It really, really depends. Okay, she says, I mean, if Mars is in Libra or a sign that is ruled by Venus, not necessarily. Not necessarily. It just really, really depends, looking at the entire chart. It really, really depends. But every planet, every energy, it has a job to do. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. Right? So
These 0 degree planets are very interesting. But what's really interesting is to look at that ingress chart on the foundation of the pre-AIDS conjunction. So the first one, I mean, there's not going to be that much difference because it only happened, a few months before the ingress. We can see, of course, in that chart that we had a 0 degrees Mars in Aquarius. So that's going to be plugging into all those 0 degrees in the ingress chart. And in the pre-conjunction, we have actually Uranus at 28 of Scorpio. So he's trining that Venus. So that brings in this idea of, again, sexually transmitted disease. I think Venus is also, exalted in Pisces. So really interesting. The second one, I didn't really see much, so I'm just going to skip over it because there's a lot to get through. But the third one I found really interesting, the final conjunction. This
Nope, it does not. And the answer to that is no. Nope. Donna says, so Venus can come sometimes to help soothe us after Mars comes. Yeah, sometimes Venus will come behind and help, put some cream on it. So yeah, sometimes we do see that.
This one seemed to really plug in a lot. We have a lot of, I didn't mark all of them as partile, but there are quite a number of things that are happening. Of course, we've got the conjunction already on top of it. We've got the conjunction degree that is making a sextile to Uranus in the ingress chart. We've got that Mars squaring the conjunction, the Saturn, Jupiter in the ingress chart, as well as the moon. And of course, it's going to be squaring the Mars and the sun in the ingress chart. It's also making a very close trine to Mercury. And we've got the moon also trining Neptune and opposing Pluto. So there's a lot happening here that is really kind of highlighting this conjunction, this pre-AIDS conjunction, so to speak. So this was the final conjunction, and it was really going haywire. Now, interestingly, when I started to research AIDS, I found that in 1986, that was the year when a lot of the governments, or particularly the American government, I think, but a lot of the governments started to put these real, like you're not allowed to travel, you can't work in certain places if you're HIV positive. There was this huge, it was kind of bad. And the death rates were rising. Now, they didn't get to their peak in 86, but they were really moving up at this point, and people were freaking out about it. And this was when Saturn and Jupiter were in their waxing square. So the ingress chart here, very quickly, you've got Saturn, Jupiter square. So there's Saturn, and Jupiter is at 6 degrees of Pisces. Saturn is at 9 Sagittarius. You've got Uranus conjunct Mars. There's Uranus at 22 Sagittarius, Mars is at 26. A bit wide, but it's still a conjunction. And Uranus is in a partile square to Mercury. Where is Mercury? Mercury's here at 22 Gemini. All these 22s, they keep coming up. 22 degrees. It's interesting. And to me, that, really was like that fear and that communication of, there's this thing and it's going to kill us all. And, the devil is here and we can't allow anyone who's got AIDS to be anywhere near anyone because, you can catch it from sitting on the same toilet seat. And it was kind of crazy. And look at this, the moon in the conjunction chart is exactly on the same degree as where Pluto has come in the ingress chart for 1986. I found that fascinating. I went, oh my God. I know it's not a transit but it's kind of like you're laying it on top. So I found that really fascinating. And of course, the Pluto in the conjunction chart is exactly square, partile square to the moon in the ingress chart. Again, you can't make this stuff up. You've got the actual degree of the conjunction. I'm only using the first conjunction here. It is exactly sextile to the degree partile Saturn. And it is also, what is it? No, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't doing that. Pluto, yeah. So Pluto is also making a sextile to that Uranus and Mars. And we've got one more thing. We've got Neptune squaring the Mercury. So there's a lot going on here. And I found that really interesting. Now, are there any comments or questions that I need to address?
Yeah.
But, you know, it is interesting that back then those conjunctions were occurring in Earth.
From Joanna. Joanna says, so.
But yeah, pretty interesting. So one of the reasons I'm going through these, the whole cycle that way, and we could definitely do this here, but yeah, I don't have time to go. And Cancer is a fascinating cycle as well, which I did start looking
I'm
at.
trying to find where she talks. Does she talk a little
But
bit
I had
about
to cut it down.
the recent one?
However, we should never forget that there are many places in the world where that is not the case, and people are still dying in droves of AIDS-related infections, because basically it's the HIV virus that they have. So we should never forget that. It's not over. But at least in the Western world and in our zeitgeist of us Westerners, you know, this seemed to be the pinnacle of the deaths and destruction of AIDS. And after 96, it was a little bit more treatable, and it started to become more and more, I mean, it was still a thing. And politically, it wasn't until early 2000s that they started to remove these restrictions of people, you know, working in certain places and whatnot, being HIV. You know, it was no longer, I don't know, it was almost like, you know, for a while, you know, at 16 degrees. So it's a partile square to Saturn. And we've got Venus on top of conjunct.
Okay,
Go on
let
to
me go to the
COVID because, hey, we need to do this. So COVID happened the year of 2020, and this is the conjunction chart for 2020. Interesting thing, we have Neptune at 18 Pisces, which is actually very close to the 1504, which is the only pandemic that had a conjunction in water sign, which I'd like to explore that a bit more, but I didn't have time to. We've also got the nodes at 19 Gemini. Okay, lots of squares here. We've got the square between Mars and Pluto, which is a partile square. We have the square to the nodes from Neptune.
Yeah, funny. Kevin picked up on that. Mm-hmm. Now, Neptune is one of the rulers of Pisces. Like Pisces has two planetary rulers. Pisces has Jupiter, and Pisces has Neptune, right, as planetary rulers. But remember, you know, we were all hearing the rumors about the panini and everything like that. Remember, we were hearing the rumors, you know, it started in the wet market, you know, wet market this, wet market that, wet market, wet market, wet market. Yeah, Neptune and Pisces. Hmm.
And yeah, so that's about it. So let's continue on, because really this is the conjunction at which at which COVID started. It began in this period of time.
Notice the 22 degrees again. She's been saying 22 degrees, 22 degrees, 22 degrees. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And then we have it's a very wide aspect. Remember, she was talking about the Mars. Okay, remember she was talking about the Mars. This is a very, very, very wide aspect from 17 degrees to 22. But you know, things gonna do some things. They're gonna do some things, right?
It was already happening in 2020. So we really should be looking at the 2000 conjunction. And this one brings us to that all wonderful 22 Taurus, which we can plug into Mari's charts and everything she was talking about. Very fascinating. So here we have Mars at 17 Gemini. Okay.
Okay, so for this, Kevin, in this chart, because this chart is the 2000 chart. So she went back to the actual pre-conjunction in this chart. So what we're looking at right now is this is 2020. Okay. And Saturn and Jupiter are conjunct in Gemini, an air sign. So notice again, like with the air sign, right? Gemini, that's going to be our travel. Eventually that's going to be our travel, because I remember, like, I was in Georgia, right? Hearing about it on the news. And I remember hearing, like, the first cases happening in California as it pertains to the United States. Well, California is West Coast, but, we have, Asia. Asia, that's going to be the most direct route to the United States from, say, China. It's going to be that, it's going to be coming that way. And this is not being xenophobic or racist or anything like that, but here in California there are many Asians, right? So just following, and historically, yes, some of the first cases were in California. So this whole air travel thing spread so quickly because of this air travel. That's air. But yeah, these two are conjunct right here, and that's Gemini. That's Gemini. You can kind of see the line marker right here. So this is the line marker. Okay. So this is Taurus. But from here to here is Gemini. Now notice this conjunction. I mean, it's saying Taurus here, but it's gonna move forward. It's going to move from earth to air. Okay, it's going to move forward from earth to air. By the time it's happening to us, this is happening in air. Right? But notice this is starting in the eighth house. Eighth house is what? House of death. House of death. Okay. So very interesting.
We're back to the 1325 and even the 531 conjunctions. It is exactly opposite, not exactly, I beg your pardon, it's opposite Pluto. It's a bit wide, but there's an opposition. Mars is also trining Uranus, and Uranus at 20 Aquarius is on the 1345 conjunction point. Saturn and Jupiter are at 22, and they are squaring Uranus pretty closely. And we have the Sun conjunct Venus. Venus particularly is trining the Moon. We can bring in the Sun there as well. I'm sorry, it's not trining. I beg your pardon. What am I looking at here? The Moon is in Aries, and that's a sextile. Beg your pardon. And then we've got Moon, Venus is trining Neptune. Okay, so we've got all this, but what we really want to see is how does this, this is like the imprimatura of this time period, and how does this, oh, sorry, there was also the ingress chart. This is the ingress chart for 2020. So let's just look at that before we put them on top of each other. So we have that ingress chart, and here we have a conjunction of Mars and Saturn at 22. Don't we love that? 22 degrees, 22 degrees.
Here go Mars again on that bullshit. Mars again. Right? And yeah, we just have this whole, we have Pluto and Saturn right here conjunct. I mean, it's very wide. It's a 5-degree difference here. But then we have Jupiter and Mars absolutely conjunct here. We still have the wet of Neptune and Pisces. Yeah. Yeah, then we have the foolishness of the communication happening because Mercury is not really likened to be in Pisces. So you all remember the conversations about the panini, on Twitter, on Facebook. We have all this going on here. We have all this going on here, right? Notice we have Uranus here in Taurus, right? We have Uranus here in Taurus. This is the sudden changes to our day of life, right? Changes to our home life, changes out of our routine because now, there's lockdown, there's this, there's that, changes to people's money and how they make money, changes to their possessions because this is in the second house here. right? Really, seeing what's going on with relationships, right? So yeah, this chart it's charting.
Of Capricorn. We have a bit of a stellium in Capricorn because we've also got Pluto and we've got Saturn all in Capricorn within orb of each other. So
Okay, so yeah, Pluto and Capricorn. We have the stellium going on, Capricorn, 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 Capricorn. We got Pluto, we got Saturn, we got Mars. Okay, these malefics here and Jupiter just expanding everything, manifesting it here down on Earth in Capricorn. And Capricorn, Saturn is happy here because Saturn, is domicile to Capricorn. Okay. So yeah.
So we've also got this Mars Jupiter is in a partile trine to the 2000 conjunction, which was at 22 Taurus. We have the moon squaring Venus, and we've got Uranus making a trine to the south node and a sextile to the north node. But what's really interesting is when you put them together. And so when I first put them together, I looked at it and I went, well, the interesting thing is, of course, we've got the south node sitting on this sort of stellium. And I thought about what that might mean, the south node. I mean, it is something that is very debilitating. It's kind of, I do know in the wonderful words of a particular teacher of mine, it's like the toilet. And so everything is just kind of being flushed down the toilet here. It's a real sense of a lack of energy. And if we think about, in many ways, the 2020, 2021 period of time, really did feel like we were being drained with all the lockdowns and whatnot. So it's interesting. We do have a bunch of other stuff happening. We have Pluto, which is sextiling the moon in the Ingress chart. We have the conjunction degree, which is, of course, making an exact trine to this Mars Jupiter. We have the moon, which is making a square to, sorry, we've got Mars making a square, to Neptune. We've got Venus, which is squaring Mercury. I think that's kind of what I kind of saw there. A lot of stuff happening. And so this is the 2020 ingress with the 2020 chart. Now, here, you're not going to see as much because, again, a lot of these outer planetary things are going to be the same. They're not going to change much. But we do have Neptune exactly in a tight sextile with that Mars Jupiter, and we have a square from Mars to that degree, to that 22 degree. So, this is reasonably, there's quite a bit going on there. But what I really want to focus on, if I have time, is there any, do I still have time? I have no idea. How am I doing for time, Wade? Hello?
Yep, you're doing pretty well. You've got about another 11, 12 minutes.
Okay, good. Are there any questions or comments or anything?
Yep, there are a few. Richard Edlund, this is the one that I would read. Richard Edlund.
It was a chart for, I call it COVID identified. It was a chart which appeared in Astrology and Medicine newsletter of the Astrological Association. And it accompanied an article called A Modern Decomposure COVID-19 by Leanne McGafferty. So thank you, Leanne. And I mean, she used this chart and just kind of analyzed it as a decomposure. I sort of looked at this chart and thought, well, this is like the birth of COVID. This is like when it was baptized, when it was named, it was identified. So I think this is a really powerful chart. When we talk about moments, this is a chart of a moment. This is a moment that is really important. We identified this virus that has gone on to kill millions of people throughout the world, and which will probably continue killing people for a while. So I thought it was really interesting to look at this chart. And of course, we have this conjunction, which, I mean, this was identified on December 30th, which is not long after the ingress and not long after, so we've got this 22 Capricorn, which
Notice this 22 keeps coming up.
happened not long after this. The moon is in a partile square to Mars, and I'm sure that our American friends will recognize that moon degree of 27 Aquarius. It is the moon on the Sibley US chart. We've got Mercury trining Uranus, and pretty closely, within
Mercury trining Uranus. Okay, so that's going to be the ease of movement. It's going to be sudden, and it's going to be the ease of the movement, of the transmission, of its spreading.
In a degree. We have, of course, the Mars Pluto is on the 2000 conjunction. We've got the Sun exactly conjunct the South Node, and it is on the 1842 conjunction degree. And we have Neptune, which is actually trining again this 1504, the cholera. I'm sorry, the smallpox, pre-smallpox pandemic degree. So there's a lot of really interesting connections there. And then, let's see. When we put that chart on top of the Saturn-Jupiter 2000 conjunction, look at this. We get all of these trines and sextiles. There's, it's all this easy kind of, whatever this COVID was, it was going to happen easily. It was in this environment where it was like, I'm going to just come in and do my thing. There's a lot of partile connections. The moon is in a partile trine to Mercury. We have the conjunction Mercury is in a partile trine to the moon. So we have this Mercury moon thing going on, which I find really interesting because moon and Mercury are both about the mind. And I think a lot of this disease, in many ways, yes, it affected the body, but I think it also affected how we think of our world, how we deal with our world, how we feel about it. So I think there was a lot of mind stuff going on as well. And they do say that there was a lot of mental, or some claim that there was a lot of mental illness that came out of the COVID. So it wasn't just this virus that was attacking the body. There was also what it was doing to our society and how we were coping with it from a mental perspective. And that can be quite interesting. We've got, of course, the partile, the conjunction degree, trining the Saturn and Pluto conjunction. So quite a number of things, which I found really fascinating. Now,
okay, I see your question. Okay, Debbie Doodle says, since she can see the connection for a pandemic, can she see it for an end to that pandemic? I mean, things they calm down, but you also have to remember that some diseases, viruses don't go anywhere. Viruses stay. Okay, I'm pretty sure there are some strains of flu floating around here that are still from the 1918 flu pandemic. Okay, viruses don't go anywhere. We don't eliminate viruses. Okay, they live. So it's not necessarily an end. It's just when the society don't think about them in that way anymore. Right? Just like now. You can get on a plane and do everything else right now. Ain't no more standing, 6 feet between someone, right? right now, right? Even though this is literally happening to us 4 years ago, right now, right? But viruses don't go anywhere. They don't go anywhere, right? And here's the thing, you say, can she map out a time span? You have the time spans, right? Of knowing potentially when something else could potentially occur. Going to get your astrological software and looking at Saturn Jupiter conjunctions. Because this is what we've been seeing throughout this presentation. The pre and actual conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter. Okay, so we have our signature, we have our planetary alignment signature, that potentially talks about or alerts us to, hey, something could happen on this, spectrum with respect to pandemics or healthcare, right? So we've been going through them: the Justinian, the Black Plague, the Spanish flu, um, AIDS, COVID. So these are signatures here in history, but we have to just pay attention. We have to pay attention. So, but yeah, good question.
Moving forward, the next one will be in 2040, and it will be at 17 Libra.
So here you go. You just asked 2040. 2040 for this next. Okay, so it's 2024. We got a little bit of time. 2040.
Libra, which is an interesting one because that is making a trine to the 531, the 1325, and the 1345 conjunctions.
So she's pulling in those previous times. Those were bacterial infections and not necessarily viral infections, right? Those plagues and stuff like that, they were bacterial infections, right? We have the air signy ones more along with the flus, right? I mean, we don't know, Donna. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the signature is here, right? And those of us who are paying attention now, we're still going to be alive. I'm gonna be 60 something, right? Um if this planet is still here, if the aliens haven't come, or if God ain't, like, what, I'm tired of y'all and just get rid of all of us, right? Um, you know, I mean, things happen. Things are gonna always happen. But if we're paying attention now, then maybe we have, and this is why I'm bringing these different types of streams, because you know um there's an energy signature to things. It just is.
I mean, it's within 2 degrees. I mean, this is actually 17, but it's really almost 18, 1755. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's going to be interesting. What could that mean? I mean, could be a big.
Yeah, and see, we have Mercury right here. Mercury is going to be that transmission. Okay, this is probably going to be public too. Transmission in this airiness right here, transmission, right? Mercury is on the same 21 degree as Mars. Remember, Mars be doing that bullshit, right? Uh-huh. Mars is doing that. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, is this going to be something because global warming and now the water is rising? I mean, we don't know. We don't know, but here's our snapshot looking forward.
It's scary, but maybe we should prepare ourselves. The other thing that's happening is in that is we've also got.
Is there an intensity signature? I wouldn't necessarily say intensity signature, but I think that um I think that we're going to pull our intensity from, like, if I were looking at this, Mars is here in Scorpio. This is telling me that um this may be something social, okay, in this 11th house, but we have Mars in Scorpio. That's combatants, that's fighting, that's conflict resulting in death, or maybe hidden secrets about what this really is, something hidden right here, right? Um, so this is enough for me. Of course, this is she did a GMT time, which is, the general standard universal time. But yeah, but we have this here. This is, so I'm seeing spread here. This is spread. Mercury moving around. This is spread. Okay, very public in the 10th house. These two added again, right? These two added again, conjuncting, right? So, yeah, this has the potential to, and this is the actual conjunction. So, that pre conjunction may be coming, before that. I think what it may be coming before that, but yeah, intensity, foolishness here, spreading here. And then we have, yeah. So Mars and Scorpio, yeah, that's not just talking about it. Yeah, that's hmm intensity, you know, because here's the thing, and what I'm saying is not insensitive, but um, let me not say that. Let me not say that. What I will say is that we have our okay, heads up information right now, 2040. Right? We have our heads up information that something potentially could happen as it pertains to, and then just looking through the history, she's talking about 531, 1325, 1345. These could be bacterial or it could be viral. We don't know, but here's the potential. We talked about it before. So if we're looking at these cycles, here's a potential. We still have yet to see.
Mars at 21, and why did I, oh yeah, that's opposite the 2000 conjunction. Okay, so we've got a number of things happening here. We've got Venus in a partile sextile with the conjunction. We've got the sun a partile square with Uranus. We've got Pluto squaring the nodes partile. We've got Mercury trining Pluto. We've got Mars conjunct the south node and trining, squaring Pluto, and finally the moon trining Venus. So there's a lot happening there. But what if we put COVID on top of it? What happens? Well, suddenly we're getting a lot more resistance. We're getting some more oppositions, and we're getting a few squares. So I would tend to think that if we're getting oppositions and squares, there's a little bit more resistance. So maybe COVID, if it comes back or if it keeps going, it might not be as, we're not going to be faced with the kind of lockdowns and freakouts that we have been. I did add here, because they are exact to the degree, these inconjuncts with Uranus in the 2014 is, an exact inconjunct to that 8 degrees where the sun and south node are. And remember, that's also on the degree of the 1840, whatever it was, can't remember now, 1841, I think it was, degree. We've also got the 17-degree conjunction, which is in conjunct with Neptune. The moon is exactly opposite that Neptune. And we've also got the conjunction of Pluto that's going to come and conjunct that moon. So there's a few things happening, and my view is that, we're not out of the woods yet, but I do believe that we'll probably be in a slightly better shape to deal with it than we were the first time, when I think it just kind of, just very naturally just slid into things and off we went. yeah, so I think that kind of brings me roughly to the end of where I want it to be. I don't think there's anything else. Yep, that's it. There's nothing else. So, any questions or comments or any?
Yeah, so that was interesting, right? That's pretty much the end of her presentation. But yeah, that was pretty interesting. Looking at what happens when Saturn and Jupiter they come and they conjunct, right? They're in pre-conjunction configuration and then they're actually conjunct. Through this presentation, we have seen how this has been a signature for quite a few pandemics as it pertains to the world, right? As it pertains to us, humanity, society. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on this? Do you agree, or do you think that it's just all coincidence? What are your thoughts as it pertains um to this? Right? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Um, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it or see what you're talking about down here in the chat. Okay, CN1 says it really is. I need to learn a bit more about astrology though. Yeah, astrology is it's a discipline. You're gonna be learning for a long time. You're always learning something. So this isn't like, you learn how to color and then like this, the yeah, I agree. The patterns were very telling. They were very telling. Yeah, Debbie Doodle says very interesting to look back historically and chart present and future Yeah, and these were things that were happening, right? So, and astrology, even though it's the woo woo, right? It really is a study of history and just looking at how things have fallen in history. And we use that, right? We use the past to kind of examine the present and potentially the future, right? Which is kind of the predictive aspect of it, but only if you are, really studying these cycles, and what's going on. But yeah, I'm coming to find that there are definite energy signatures for certain things. And yeah, this was definitely one of them. This was definitely one of them. Saturn, Jupiter conjunctions, throw a little bit of Mars in there, and you definitely have a recipe for disaster. Also depending on what Mercury is doing as well, but it's mainly Saturn and Jupiter, right? So, yeah. Yeah. Very, very interesting. So now that you all know, around 2040, we're going to have another one of these conjunctions. Does this necessarily mean pandemic? No. Is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Absolutely, it's possible. And we've seen the evidence, right? Okay, Donna says, I'm learning to use the astrology more in my spell work and even looking at my personal chart to see what I should be really hitting at, which times is power. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kev says, quite another eye opener. Yeah, absolutely interesting. Just plugging in the dates in the astrology software and seeing what's happening. So, like I said, astrologers are historians pretty much. Where you have to go back, you have to look, and then potentially look at the patterns, look at the cycles, look and see what's happening, right? That's really what you're supposed to do with it. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I know this was not the most quote unquote fun of a stream, but I thought it was important to bring this and present this to you all because I really do think it's important that we understand and we make sure we're paying attention to what's happening around us and above us, right? Connecting more. Because remember, back in the day, 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, when we had all these monarchies around, Oh, they had astrologers, looking up things for them to tell them the best days to do X, Y, and Z. They were using their quote unquote magicians and their astrologers, right? And a lot of people think astrology is just, oh my God, I'm a Pisces, so I'm a daydreamer. No, it goes very much in depth. And when you are studying humanity and things that happens, you plug that astrology in, it's very telling. Yeah. Joanna says, I enjoyed this. Well, I'm glad you did. Dasharie said, I would like to get into some more of these lessons. Yeah, yeah, there are, we can go down the rabbit hole with so many of these, astrological. Okay, these are astrological patterns as it pertains to whatever the specific subject is. It's out there. It's out there, right? Yeah, so this technology age and like everything. So D-Dub said very informative. Okay, thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed. Again, this was not my presentation. I'm just showing you all um this video that I found a few weeks ago, and I thought it was really, really interesting. But yeah. Okay, you enjoy these too? Yeah. Super spicy spice, and I love your name. This is a subject that needs to be studied more in order to understand the history so that we can predict future events. Absolutely. Because, like I said, I don't know if you all know, but again, with that 2020 Jupiter, um, Saturn Jupiter conjunction, the astrologers were wondering what in the world is going to happen because they've seen the patterns before. They've seen the patterns before. The same thing, like I keep talking about United States, and maybe that'll be the next one that I review. The next one that I'll probably go over is Uranus and Gemini as it pertains to the United States because the pattern is there. The pattern for war is there. Okay, it is there. So maybe that'll be the next one that I do. But yeah, if we are paying attention, right here, the thing about it is today, mainstream society tells you that this is just all make believe, it's fun. It's something that you do, when ladies get together and hang out and cackle and all like that. This isn't serious study, it's not real and everything like that. This is why a lot of people don't pay attention to it because they just boil it down to, okay, get my horoscope out the newspaper every day. This is a very disciplined um subject. You have to be disciplined and willing to, go in depth and, spend all night looking at these charts and comparing things, right, over time and researching. This is a discipline. This is a serious discipline. Okay, so the people who are using the astrology, they're doing good. Okay, they're doing good. I mean, they're doing good. So because mainstream society say that it's not real and it's just stupid parlor tricks and all like that, people don't pay attention to it. But those of us who do, we pay attention. So yeah, I agree. I agree. Hey Tanjon. Listen, we're gonna see. I wouldn't necessarily say basically a blueprint, but if you thought, I would say look at patterns. Look at patterns because there are patterns and energy signatures to all of this. Looking at astrology with the United States, the one that I was looking at yesterday about domestic terrorists, and using bombs, right? Um, there's a presidential in the United States. There's a presidential astrological signature. Other countries, there are astrological signatures. We're just looking at the one here about pandemics. There's a technology astrological signature. So these are patterns. So I wouldn't necessarily say blueprints. I would say patterns. Study the patterns and study the cycles. Yeah. So, you know, and this is the main point. Donna says it's funny because the same people who tell us not to pay attention to it are the same people who use it in their media and their companies daily. They have us looking one way while they have the answer. This is absolutely it. Absolutely it. You're welcome, girl. So that's it. That's all. We're just about at 2 hours here. I'm going to let you all go. And I really, really hope that you enjoyed today's presentation and that it gave you something to think about. And yeah, I'll be back at some point tomorrow. Tomorrow will probably be the reading on Umar. It just probably will be the reading on Umar. And then I'll be off for the weekend. I'll be off Saturday and Sunday. So tomorrow we'll have a stream. I'm off Saturday and Sunday, and Monday I'll be back. Okay, so I'll see you again tomorrow, right? Have I ever done this for slavery in America? I have not. I have not. Honestly, I don't want to even look into that because I'm not about to do the trauma and the RBG flag. Like I'm not going to do all that with that. But, pandemics affect everyone, right? Certain things affect everyone, but no, I've never looked into that because I'm not going down the Hotep hotline. I'm just not doing it, right? So, yeah. You're welcome, Debbie Doodles. Kevin says this is quite helpful. I'm glad you're here for it, Kev. Thanks again. Yeah, Brittany, thank you, Q. This was interesting, Dr. Reed. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, make sure, like I said, that you make sure you still sub to the channel because YouTube is weird. Make sure you still have your notifications turned on. Thank you to all who are channel members. Thank you to all who grow the channel. Thank you to my Patreon patrons. Thank you to channel members. Thank you to those who sub. Like this video if you haven't liked it already. Don't be afraid to share this with someone who has an open mind, right? Because the more of us that know these things, we're able to navigate and maneuver a little bit better, right? Don't apologize for Mars madness. It's not, girl. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. So, like I said, I love you all. I will see you around these YouTube streets. I'll be back tomorrow, and I'll see you all then for this reading on Umar. So take care. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and I'm out. Thank you so much for sharing, girl. I appreciate it. Thanks, ma'am.